Hey everybody, welcome to Radical Ready Live for week number 2. So happy to be here. Pat, how's it going?
Good. We're starting to get this technology thing figured out this time.
I know.
I didn't drop off as soon as we went live, so one
Well,
step forward.
that was intentional last time. I just trying to mess with you a little bit. We have a lot of regulars. Ben, hey Ben, Allison, you were the first. Yes, we're gonna start. We're gonna have to start a gift. Whoever leaves the first comment gets a gift. So, can you choose? Maybe. Well, you have to let us know what you're thinking. But yes, of course, you can a new
A
puppy.
new puppy.
I like that. So we have well, a lot of people on. This is awesome. Ian, thanks for being on. Um, Kristen, I think you were on last week too. So good to see you. And Elsa, I know from in the UK and London. So great to see you on. Mahala, thank you for joining us. Outstanding. Um, John Thomas, are you new to this? Are you new to our
I know
to our
John.
community? You know John, okay,
Yeah, he did.
fantastic.
He actually did the main titles for Tuscaloosa, which are
Look at that.
just happened to be right behind me. That wasn't a plan. Hey, John.
Worlds colliding. I love
Yeah.
it. That's good. Hey John, thanks you. And Rebecca and Heidi, thanks for being on again. Yeah, so it's good to see everybody. So I'm going to start. We talked about there's a lot of we're going to get into some really important topics, but there's some really hard hitting stuff. So I was thinking after the last show, there was a few questions that came to me offline, and there's two of them in particular. The first one was, what does Pat go by, Patrick or Pat? Because everyone hears me call him Pat, and everyone said, should I call him Patrick or Pat? So Pat, you got to set Patrick or Pat or Patty. You got to set the record straight. What do you like? Because I'm going to call you Pat,
Yeah.
but
It's so here. It's probably make this more complicated than I should, but I actually like the variety. So I always introduce myself as Patrick, and professionally I tend to do that. But my friends and family all call me Pat. And whenever someone calls me Pat, even if it's a professional acquaintance, P Dog would be good. Um, I'm always kind of delighted when someone just uses Pat too. So I
okay.
guess the short answer is mix it up.
Well, this is friends and family in this community, so I guess you just heard it from the source. He can be Pat to you guys. Um, and Allison, did you like the movie? Did you like Tuscaloosa? She's referencing right behind Pat as she
She's she's
types her
she's thinking
review.
she's
She's
thinking about it.
1 star, 1 to 5 stars. We
Yeah,
gotta
that's too
give us
much.
a
I can't
give us
handle
a
that.
5 star rating. Now she's thinking carefully,
Yeah.
thinking.
Um,
And so the
yeah.
good answer.
Yeah.
So the second thing I was asked was to me was why am I wearing a stocking cap? So and I'm wearing a different color today, and I was thinking about this, and I don't know, Pat, you could probably answer this. I don't know if it's a security blanket. When I started going bald, I started liking the way the stocking cap looked, and it's just kind of become my thing. Number one, and number two, it's going to be below zero here in Minneapolis in like 12 hours. So I'm sort of preparing for that, but that's kind of an excuse because I tend to wear them. I don't sleep in it, just so everyone knows, but um,
But
it's kind of my thing.
it's definitely kind of a permanent winter accessory for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I know there was, so any questions you have about us, like we said, we're going to answer anything, or even questions about the world or questions about the movie. Let us know and we'll try to answer them. So Pat, speaking of the movie, um, I know it started I think on the second or early this week, it went live in the UK under a different title.
Yeah. So yeah, the film is now available in the UK under the title Summer of '72. And it's, as far as I know, it's available on all the major platforms over there. So definitely check it out. And we're continuing to play a lot of film festivals too, which is really exciting. So we played the Central Florida Film Festival, I think weekend before this last one. We won Best Picture, which is great. And we're coming up, we've got a whole bunch of festivals we're playing in February, including the Santa Fe Film Festival, San Francisco Independent Film Festival, something called the Prospector Film Festival, which is in Connecticut. We're playing, gosh, I can't remember, I've lost track, but I think we're playing
Yeah,
we're playing a
that's
film
great.
festival in Spain as well. So I think we're playing about 6 or 7 festivals in the month of February, which is great. So yeah, we're
Yeah.
continuing to get a lot of exposure, and it's been great.
That's good. And for those to set contacts for some of you who I know who are new, Pat and I had the opportunity to produce a film over the past 3 years, kind of as a, well, for Pat, probably more of a full-time job, but certainly a passion project. And we're really proud. So you'll hear us talking about it probably every week, and love to get feedback from everybody about it. So that's why we're bringing it up. So all right, so let's kind of jump in. Pat and I were every week we want to have a brilliant guest, and Angela Howard, who I'm going to give an introduction to in a little bit, is waiting backstage to come on, and I can't wait to have her on. And we have a fun story of how we met, actually. So we'll share that. But we really wanted to tackle this concept of not concept, just the need to talk about how, right? How do we start to implement inspired change? How do we keep this movement going? We've been spending a lot of time defining the why and the purpose, and I think we've locked arms and everyone's feeling it. A people first approach, creating inspiring culture. It's going to be tough. We know that. Change is always a process, but how do we create a sustainable change within organizations? And with that, Pat, there's been with all this change, there's also a lot of disruption and happening in the market and in the industry. And you and I were chatting about the Workday Pecan acquisition, and I know you have some good, interesting thoughts about that. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, it was really exciting news. And for anyone who doesn't know, if you missed the news last week, Workday acquired an employee engagement platform called Pecan. They're actually a Danish company, Dan. And I know when you were overworking in Europe, you were definitely aware of them.
Yeah,
Although I think they're a lot less well known here in the States, and they've got just a really great product. And
solid
it's
company, solid company.
solid company, and
Good things to say about them.
yeah, and I think was a really good choice for Workday. So what this ends up meaning for the market is that now Workday is able to directly integrate, once they get the acquisition completed and the integration work done, a really powerful employee engagement platform to all their Workday customers. And Dan, you and I were chatting about this sort of the last couple of days and last week. That I mean, this is sort of like in many ways, sort of a point of arrival, or maybe in some ways, another way to put it is a closing act of traditional employee engagement. In that it's reached such a maturity level now, such an acceptance level, and now the tool set's just there. It's almost just kind of like air. It's now a tool that we can use to really easily understand, the psychological investment that employees and teams and organizations in a company have at any given moment, and the capability to do that. And whether it's a pulse survey or an annual survey, whatever your choice is, the ease of doing that is just going to be much more self-service, self-guided, directly out of the box for clients. So wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, and love to get perspective. So weigh in, everybody. But well, here's a question to get perspective on. While again, Pecan's great tech. There's a lot of great tech companies out there. Pat and I have grown up in technology, but is there a misalignment between what technology offers and what organizations need? And I think that's a fundamental question, and that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today as well. When we think about how do we keep this momentum of change happening, so would love to get perspective, and any of our European folks on the line, any perspective on a Pecan as well. Just looking at some of the notes, and so they'll catch up with
ADP.
ADP.
Yeah, and Allison, you bring up a great point. I mean,
Yeah,
whether it's Microsoft acquired LinkedIn, which had just acquired Glint. So Glint is sort of in that Microsoft stack, and ADP's got some great tools. I think that's the broader point here, is that kind of the access to tools in the various ERPs. I'm sorry, to be more specific, the access to engagement platforms and tools built into many of the different ERPs is just going to be everywhere. And that's just we'll sort of moving beyond that sort of vendor or third-party vendor right into full integration. And I think Josh Burson, Dan, we were looking at his write-up of this last
yeah,
week, and I think he described this as like employee engagement 4.0 or something. So there's sort of that ease of use. And the other thing, which is also really important too, is the tool set that helps managers work through action planning and do something with the insights has just become really mature as well in all the
Right.
major platforms, and that's really exciting. But like you said, the paradox here is that we've kind of finally reached this point that we were all pushing toward for so many years. But now, sort of the needs, I think, is maybe out of alignment with what we can now sort of do with the platform, and that's because the idea of workplace has changed. Where we do work has a new definition, and the kinds of certainly external factors that are weighing in, stress, and many other things, bring us to what you and I like to call the whole person experience. We need to think more broadly about this. So, I think it's a strong case for the science changing, and where we're going to be able to get the data from to understand how well employees and teams are doing against employee experience plan design. We may see, sort of like you said, a misalignment between kind of what we can do with these new tool sets or mature tool sets and what we need to be able to do. And
so it's what data do we bring together to truly tell a story? And I know Ian's on from Visier, and Visier does an awesome job of creating dashboards that really tell appropriate stories for leaders and organizations. So, and we're going to have Ian on, so we will talk about that down the road in much more detail. So I guess our fundamental question we're going to tackle today is again, how, right? How do we accelerate inspired change as we move beyond, and Pat mentioned this, as we move beyond engagement with a whole person and human-centric experience mindset? And the good news is we have a human-centric design experience expert who are getting ready to bring online. And so I've had the opportunity to work with Angela Howard, and we'll kind of share that story. But I love her mission, her personal mission statement, and it's to reinvent the role of HR and create more human-centric workplaces that enrich the lives of a diverse workforce and inspire them to do good for the world. Right? Sign me up. That's about as good as it gets.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So I am going to bring Angela on. Angela, are you ready? We'll have you on in about 4 seconds. See, I'm getting really good with this tech. Very proud of myself. Angela, invite's been sent.
Well, while we're waiting for Angela to pop on, Dan, we've been continuing to get our new digs up and running, right? Oh, yeah, there's Angela.
Yes, we have. Angela.
Yeah. Hey, friends. How was everyone?
So great to see you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
And
Angela.
Patrick, I know we haven't met, but now I'm going to call you P-Dog.
P-Dog. There it is. There it is.
It's great to meet you.
It's great to meet you too.
I've never called him P-Dog, but that's going to be new.
Thanks, Allison.
Yeah, now it's done. So when I do sort of the the recap of this on LinkedIn, I'm going to say, P-Dog and Angela and Dan had a great conversation. So
yes. And now I want a nickname.
You want a nickname? All right,
we're going to leave that to Allison.
We'll leave that to Allison. Yes.
Thanks, Allison.
So Angela, I want to in a moment kind of tell how we became acquainted story, but tell us a little bit about you and who you are and what you're passionate about.
Yeah. So my background is in organizational psychology, which is just a really fancy name for behavior at work. So a lot of my career has been focused on operationalizing culture and picking apart what that means and what it looks like, what it feels like. So I mainly work with executives, founders, helping them shape pivotal parts of their journey with culture. So my sweet spot is really points of change. I love to see transformations happen. And so that's my background. I have as you mentioned, Dan, thank you for reading my mission statement there, but truly, this is my life's work.
Yeah.
I have a firm belief that first of all, employers and organizations have such a necessary hand to play in creating destinations where people can do good work to live out their purpose. And they also have a huge responsibility of sending happy humans home back to society so that societies and communities can be improved and strengthened. So it's just, for me, it's a full ecosystem. And so I'm really passionate about working with organizations to create better places to be.
That's why we have you on today, and that's why you and I have gotten along famously. So the story is kind of a fun story, and Angela, then I have to ask you a question which you can answer very honestly on this call. So Pat and I founded a company called Modern Survey, and we were acquired by Aon about 4.5 years ago. No, 4 years ago. 4 years ago, probably.
Almost 5 years ago.
Almost
Wait,
5 years.
Yeah, almost to the day, Dan.
Yes, that's right.
5 years
February
to the day,
1st,
because I think the
5 years
deal was
ago.
announced February. Exactly.
So Angela ran employee engagement and culture at Walgreens during that time, and there was an opportunity with Aon to bid on the Walgreens project, and prior to announcing the acquisition of Modern Survey, it was our very first sales call with the new, or sales pitch with the new technology. We came to Chicago. It had not been announced yet that we were being acquired, but I had the opportunity to meet Angela, and we demoed the tech, and we ended up working together. But my question is, how did I do from a demo perspective? I came in as the tech seller. I mean, I guess we won, so I'm thinking it's a good thing. But
yeah, I mean I've had a lasting impression of you, Dan. Obviously I'm here, so it's, like the
connect the dots.
That's good.
The synergy was great from the onset. So yeah, I was just kind of sad that you ended up not leaving, but you ended up kind of stepping out a little bit. But then I think we got reconnected at a HR tech show, and
That's right.
so that's kind of how we continued our relationship. So
well,
you did an awesome job.
Well, and you did, and honestly, I was kind of being playful with that, but it was you were so passionate about what you wanted to do, and really transform culture, and it was just inspiring to me. So for me, kind of our first opportunity in a public company, we were a scrappy startup tech for 16 years, and I was really proud to have a chance to work with obviously a huge organization, and to bring our technology to the front stage, and meet you and meet your team. And here we are 5 years later, having a transformational and awesome conversation. So happy to have you on.
Thank you.
See, I'm checking some questions.
I think I have a nickname. Tangela.
That's good. P-Dog and Tangela.
Love it.
That might stick.
Allison needs to be a staple with every single session you guys do, so everyone has a nickname.
Yeah, and Angela, I'm waiting for, well, maybe next time I can get mine. Yeah. All right. So, Angela, Changela, is that?
It's so hard to say.
So P-Dog and Changela. Here we go. So we're all right. Time to get serious here. We're having way too much fun. Now we have to. No smiles.
Okay.
Kidding, of course.
It's hard for me.
So I guess I want to first kind of kick this off by talking about engagement, and really this concept of beyond engagement. As you've all heard us talk about, everything's changed, work has changed, the society around us has changed, continues to change. So I guess the big, elephant in the room from a conversation point is, is traditional engagement still relevant, right? And do we need new science? And if so, what might that look like? Do we need to become less transactional? You can see I'm leading the witness here a little bit, because I believe yes to all this. And do we need to meet employees a little bit more, where they are, when they need to be given feedback, and to give feedback to, meaning it's more those moments that matter. So I guess my question is how do we, in practice, going back to that how question, begin this shift? What mindset change is required? We'll start with that and open it up to both of you.
And just to be more specific, Dan, and I'm going to just move the question over to Changela. But it's, what are your thoughts on the science specifically? We do really want your honest opinion as an IO psych, and a very experienced practitioner. And just to narrow in on what Dan was talking about, what message would you give to leaders out there HR leaders who are beginning to think about sort of like, well, what should I be doing something? And if so, where should I be starting?
Yeah, so I think we're seeing the science move in a really interesting direction. Traditional engagement, you really talked about how you provide clarity and leadership and strategic direction, and do you trust your leadership team, and all of those things are still really important. But I think what we're starting to see now is additional indices really around what makes up true engagement and what makes up the whole human. So things like belonging, things like flexibility, choice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. These are things that I think we've measured in other ways, but I think there's going to be a huge next gen to this work, which is going to pull in some of those human elements that don't seem as tactical, and we probably didn't measure because they weren't as measurable as we thought they were. Now we're starting to see there are ways to measure those things.
I was just going to jump in there for a follow-up, Angela.
Yeah.
Thanks for your thoughts on that. And how about the fact of, because Dan and I talk about this quite a bit, and we chat with clients about this idea, sort of work in and of itself has changed for many, like for 50% of the workforce, roughly, right? They're working from home now, and will probably be moving into a new kind of hybrid workforce in the future, even once, there's hopefully, fully vaccinated scenario, and people have a choice of going back to work. How does that fit into the kind of the models or indices, as well as we sort of think of the definition of work, and maybe to nuance that even more, sort of this like, the boundaries between work and life have really been removed quite a bit. So how does that factor into the engagement models as well?
Yeah, I think it's kind of just narrowing in on this idea of outcomes-based leadership and leadership's ability to execute that well. So, when you say outcomes-based leadership, really what I'm talking about is you're able to clearly set a vision, a strategy, and expectations, and you allow your workforce to be measured and held accountable to those things. So the ability for leadership to do that, I think, is going to be kind of like narrowed in from a leadership effectiveness perspective.
Cool.
Yeah. So, I think that kind of brings us to what we've been talking about from a humanization of work and a human-centric design standpoint. And we use language, we've been talking about organizational character, over the past few months, and really stemming around the concept that an organization is made up of its people, of course, and the character is kind of defined by the character of the masses of people who work for an organization. And by doing that, if we talk about character at an organizational level, it starts to humanize by nature the organization, right? Because character is meant to be more of an individual concept. So as we think about that, Angela, your expertise on where do we start when we really start to implement a more human-centric culture? I mean, and is this a top-down approach? Is it a bottom-up approach? Is it a combination? What are your thoughts on that, and where can organizations and leaders begin?
Yeah, I kind of go back to basics on this one, because culture, I know that it's a buzzword and people are like, well, what is it exactly? And what does it look like? And I can't hold it. So really all culture is a culmination of the behaviors and beliefs and habits of a collective group of people. And then that shows up in different ways, right? It shows up around how you celebrate failure. It shows up around how work gets done. It shows up in all these different ways. So it's a simplistic concept, but a really hard one to shape. So I always say start with your purpose, because you really want to attract and retain other people who are aligned with your purpose. So if you don't know what it is, you already have a gap, and the characters of the organization is probably already meshed together. So the purpose is kind of like the heart of the company, the heart and soul of the company. And then if you have core values, if you don't have values, you should understand what those are. but you really need to know what the behaviors are that align those. Because you can say things like integrity, right? But what does it look like?
Right.
What does it feel like? What does it
feel
sound
like?
like? So having behaviors is really important. So those are the foundational pieces I think that are really important.
How would an organization think about understanding where they stand? Let me reframe this another way. To understand culture, kind of where you are, and then defining it kind of maybe where you want to move it toward. Like you said, it's a collection of behaviors and purpose. So does it make sense to sort of do a culture style study at your organization to get a benchmark, so you sort of understand, asking people, hey, which of these behaviors, best describe the place I work, right? And we kind of get an inventory of that, and then we think about what do we want, and then it's a change management process. Is that still the best way to come at this for leaders?
Yeah, I think it's also about understanding what the perception is currently, which I think you said actually, which is, what do we think it is today? And I think what you'll find if you haven't done this is it's all different. So it's an alignment process too. And it's making sure that it's not just the leadership team. It's important that the leadership team is really bought in, but it's also a collection of the thoughts and the perceptions of the rest of the team. So it's a top down and a bottom up.
Yeah. I was having a conversation actually with someone on this call, Heidi, I think you're on the call. We were talking about kind of a human-centric workplace, and Angela, you brought up something interesting, which is it's easy to start thinking about it, but it's also, once you start understanding you're trying to be more human, the complexity in that, right? Yes. What is the most complex thing that we have very little understanding of? The human being and the human brain, right? So if we're saying we're going to get more human, so actually this is easier. In some ways, I think we're setting ourselves up for a big journey and a big commitment, and that's why we talk about this inspired change, and that it isn't easy just to say we're going to become more human in the organization. In fact, words like empathy and humility and caring and love, and I promised I was going to use those words every week, and I will, really come into the equation, because that's human beings at their best and their worst, right, to some degree. And I guess that was more of a statement, and I guess the question there is, is when we think about new science and psychology, are there new understandings of what make people tick that we need, and assessments or to really understand the whole person experience? What would you recommend organizations do to just understand their people, their culture, and so we can truly put human-centric change into place that matches people who work for an organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I like to kind of compare it to the customer experience a little bit, because we have spent a lot of time and money mapping out customer experiences and consumer experiences. We don't do that for our people. And if you think about it, a lot of it's very similar. There's a lot of parallels. So with human-centered design, typically with design thinking in general, things like journey mapping, creating personas, understanding first what is the hire to retire and then after. Actually there's a little bit of a journey before that when you're trying to attract people. So doing more journey mapping type of exercises with your company to understand what are the points within the life cycle of an employee that are really, we call them moments that matter, right? So these are the things that really hit on the human experience, like life events, becoming a new leader, being demoted. There's ego and emotions and all. So all of these pieces, understanding what is the journey, and then thinking about the differences and the personalization that can be done through the persona process. So the persona process is really about saying, okay, let me create a human, so if you have like half your team is a production team and the other half is an office team. Those two might be completely different personas because what they're experiencing is very different. So putting a name and a face and a character, a personality to somebody, and then saying, what are we going to do differently here versus there within the full journey of the organization?
Yeah.
What are your, could I jump in, Dan? I was going to,
Yeah.
so just to explore the design thinking a little bit, I've facilitated, any number of design thinking sessions through the years. I love it. Just, it's such a great experience to be involved with. But what do you recommend? I mean, there's, in terms of an organization thinking about doing this work, what's the right way to do it? Is this something that you can do internally? Can you bring the right objectivity to be able to do this work well internally, or are you better off working with an external firm? And then related to that, what do you recommend that you go through and do a lot of interviews to kind of create the personas, or are you better off getting stakeholders or like a group of people to help kind of design sort of in a more kind of committee way what the persona should be? Because personally, I've done it both ways. I have a bit of an opinion on it, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's, I always advocate for objective viewpoints. When you're within an organization, it's very hard for you to see the trees from the forest, or, whatever that analogy is, but you're in it and you're a little biased. So I would certainly recommend at least a partner who can help you shape the process and bring that objectivity to the process. Interviews, stakeholder reviews, using a technology like a survey tool to understand I think about a matrix, right? So there's a lot of engagement indices or items we can test on, but which ones are important to that group? So we know, like, from a worldwide view, like, what are the indices that are important to generally the engagement of an employee, but your group may be different. The moments that matter for your group may be different, a little bit different or personalized. And so having a tool to help measure that, and then again, having that partner to provide some objectivity and to help you actually create a deliverable. Because you've got to memorialize this somewhere, and it's got to live somewhere. And I think that oftentimes ends up being the hang up.
Yeah, I agree with you, Angela. And this whole process is equal parts art as it is tactical, and it's different for different organizations. And having someone help, like you said, help you bring the objectivity, help you design the process. It does end up taking a lot of time and work and resources, but you just want to make sure you do that work well. Cool.
One thing to add to that, we talked about this last week. The concept of therapy came up, and relationships specific to therapy, and to sort of prove this point. If you're going to couple, if a couple thinks one of the person in the couple can actually be the therapist, right? You're not going to get very far. I will be the therapist in our relationship, right? So this objectivity with someone from the outside listening, understanding, and then trying to give direction. To me, that's the most cut and dry, clear example of why having someone who's not, like you said, Angela, not in the weeds, living it day to day, already has a biased opinion to some degree.
Yeah, and I would just add, regardless of who you are, you have bias. And when I think about the diversity, equity, inclusion work in particular, a lot of the work that I'm doing is around dismantling systems that have been here for a very long time. And so if you're in that system, it's really hard for you to see, wow, that's actually creating more exclusivity than inclusivity. Having that external partner does help with the objectivity there.
So I'm going to ask a very, we promised this show's kind of, direct and unpredictable. I'm going to ask them just for everyone, just some key questions. Should organizations continue with their annual engagement survey? Question mark.
People are thinking, this is when you need to have your little like Jeopardy.
Yes.
It depends. No says Ben. Rat.
I mean, from your perspective, and there's no wrong, right? I mean, I'm just curious from your perspective, because this question we get all the time, right? And well, I'm going to let the question that I'm just putting out there first and see what.
Well,
what do you think?
Yeah, well, I was just going to actually reframe things a little bit, and then Dan, maybe you can think of another question poll we can do in a second. And then let's shift over to the how thing, so we can, because it's easy to kind of work through concepts and ideas, but we promised a how, so let's get to that in a minute. Angela, what are your thoughts on, like, another frame on this is sort of, and I know I have a feeling this is where Ben's leading us, is more sort of team dynamics, and it's sort of that sense of affinity that happens with the dynamic that happens when people work together and how that feels, and that's sort of another dimension and another way to think about this, sort of the psychology and chemistry of teams. So and the other thing that makes me think about that is, since we've gone through such a unique period of time with work from home, that's yet another dimension or construct, which is people aren't together in the same room. So, and we don't know a lot probably about that psychology yet, like, how that feels virtually versus intimately being in the same room. So the chemistry and dynamics might shift a little bit. And then as we move forward, we probably are going to expect a lot more hybrid models. What are your thoughts on that piece as well, as you think about sort of, I guess it's more sort of that personality, team dynamic, and there's probably a leadership piece in there too that sort of gets it, the sort of the chemistry of organizations and personality types coming together, a little separate from traditional culture, which is sort of like you said, it's sort of an amalgamation of behaviors and purpose and things.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I'm a firm believer that, like, team outings and ping pong tables and, like, that's not culture, right? Those are things that enhance the experience, that can make you kind of settle into maybe a more innovative environment where you're feeling at home, and those things aren't culture. The analogy that comes to mind, and I wish I could remember who told me this analogy, because I want to be able to credit them. But they basically said, okay, restaurants, right? You can eat at home, but you go to a restaurant for an experience. And so I think what's going to happen is, in this hybrid work environment, workplaces are actually, the physical spaces are going to turn more into things that you can't get at home, right? Like, I can work from my office. I don't need to go to another office to do what I'm doing here. The workplace should be a place where you're collaborating, you're enhancing the team experience, you're connecting, you're innovating, you're designing, you're strategizing. So how do you create the actual physical space to enhance that? And again, creating workspaces that it's not a copy paste from what you can get at home within your home office. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how I'm seeing how this is going to evolve.
Yeah.
No, that's great. It's great input.
Yeah. So I think with I'm looking at some of these questions coming in. So to the question that I posed, Ben.
Oh, Jason's here too.
Ben,
yeah, this is a huge topic.
No, Jason never back. This is a huge topic in employee experience work today. Hey, Jason, thanks for joining. Yeah. So I mean, I think we promised the how today and really diving into that. So maybe we take the next 10, 15 minutes and I mean, so how do we begin this human-centric journey? I mean, what are things we can take away today, tomorrow? What should leaders be thinking about if they're on this call today, and they have a meeting tomorrow? I mean, how do we really start to ensure this change gets life, gets momentum, and lasts, and isn't just a buzzword or a flash topic, that this truly becomes a change, right? Truly becomes an inspired change, and truly starts to humanize work in a way that we know is absolutely necessary. So, I mean, what are the 2-3 steps, do you think, Angela?
All right, only 2, huh? Okay, so
or 5.
I have so many. I have like a whole list. The first one is to do an audit on your basics. Is there alignment on purpose and behaviors? That's the first one. And a great way to do that is in your next leadership meeting. Ask everyone to tell you what your purpose is and see where there's a disconnect or not. Maybe you're doing this really well. The second thing would be, I'm a huge believer of this, is that culture is not an HR thing. It's a leadership thing. So strengthening your leadership team and creating leadership behaviors that are aligned to more human-centric ways of working. And I know that's like a big fuzzy topic, but it's really about empathy. It's about creating clarity and autonomy for your team. It's treating them like adult human beings. And so is your leadership team doing that? And where do you need to strengthen from a development perspective or hold leaders accountable? At the end of the day, culture is also what we hold accountable. And sometimes things are happening in your organizations that you're not holding accountable. So leadership is a big component of that and creating or changing your culture.
I love that, and it's Jason just repeated back one of your quotes, and I think we're going to have to tweet this out. Culture is not an HR thing, leadership thing. Bam.
Yes.
Drop the mic.
100%.
Nicely done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No.
It is such an important point because one of my missions, part of that mission statement is, you can't. We've got to create better leaders. The bar is very low right now, to be honest, and traditional management just doesn't work. And so we really need to level up leaders, or we need to give them the self-reflection to know that leadership is not for them. And that's okay. We're not all leaders, and we need to make it more socially acceptable that leadership is not the only path to success. You could also be a very good technical expert.
I think, Angela, when you and I were chatting a few weeks ago, I think I made the statement, we talked about that, and I made the statement, not everyone should be a parent either, and that's okay.
That's okay.
Right?
Nor does everybody want to.
Yeah, and this idea that sort of, everyone should have the same skill set and the same ability as everyone else. And I think, and we know leadership, the art of leadership is having the ability to care and having the ability to sort of unconditionally care and love over anything. Obviously, there's a lot of attributes in leadership that are important, being able to organize and summarize and inspire. But I think caring, from my perspective, is probably the number one trait that leaders that rose, especially in 2020, and leaders that will continue to see success 2021 and beyond, caring, truly caring about their people, their team, their purpose, their business.
So I was just going to jump in. I've got another frame on this, Angela. I'd love to get your thoughts. This has just been an amazing conversation. Thank you for
thank you for having me.
Wise words and just really boiling it down to a clear tactical strategy. I know organizations take a different run at this sometimes, and it actually is sort of closer to that design thinking model, but it may not be coming from the psychology side of it, where we tend to dwell, but it's more from that designer, like employee branding agency kind of approach to this work, where organizations, and it's usually CEO driven, or it's like, we've got to change culture here. I want to reposition my company in a different way, and this is how I want it to look at the market, and this is how I want to think about when people think about what it's like for people to work here. I want it to look like this, and then I want that intersection point between customer and employee to be like that. What do you say to leaders who might be either dealing with that, meaning there's sort of another pressure point, there may be sort of an HR initiative, and then there's maybe another flank on this, and what are your thoughts on that sort of the different approach, and then kind of how to ideally make this all work, where we really, and this is kind of where I was going with this, that we end up with benefits where they need to manifest, right? And designers will talk about, they'll do the design thinking work, but then in the end, it's like, okay, we really understand people and their needs. Now, how do we make sure we deliver on those needs to them, right? And wants, which ends up being a benefit. So what are your thoughts on that, sort of that design employee branding approach to this versus kind of traditional IO psych strategy, and how do we help organizations win?
Yeah, if you talk about this upcoming generation here, Gen Z, well, not upcoming, they're here. So they are very purpose driven, and more so, even more than millennials. So the brand, the perception, but also the words and the action are really important. So things I would flag there. One is, make sure whatever brand you're creating, there's no cognitive dissonance when that employee starts with you, because that's the biggest deterrent. Talk about disengagement. you've told me all these great things. You've promised me all this wonderful, you do social justice work and you care about, Black Lives Matter or whatever it is, whatever you're trying to put out there into the market to say, we care about this and this is our mission and this is what we're connected to. And then you join the company and the actions and the words and the observations aren't there. You're going to lose people real fast. So that's my one red flag. The other one is, I guess it's kind of connected, is really just making sure everyone's walking the walk, talking the talk. And not focusing all your energy on the flashiness. Focus your energy on improving those behaviors and leadership within your company.
Yeah, and Pat, we chat about this, and absolutely, not to pick on the Gen Z generation, but I will, because I think it's a really important generation to understand, and that idea around that purpose-driven passion for organizations is their starting point, right? Number one, even just from a talent acquisition standpoint, finding an organization that represents their personal beliefs and their values, that's so the brand of a company and what they do and how they represent themselves, and not just what they say, but how they walk the walk and talk the talk. And number two, I mean, and this is kind of to talk a little bit about what I think is the downfall of a classical traditional employee engagement is, if you ask a Gen Z employee, what's more important, right? Social companies supporting social justice in the environment and really having a purpose that leaves the world a better place, and purpose that is inclusive, or a company you want to grow in the organization, a company where you intend to hang out for a while, a company where you get along with your manager, right? More of these traditional transactional things where we've sort of linked that to engagement. There's just so much more, and that's that whole person mindset, and then that humanization mindset. And like you said, if an organization promises these things and then doesn't walk the walk, people are going to become very disengaged very quickly.
Yeah, Jason had a great input here. He referred to this as cultural continuance, is what we call this, when that disconnect between what people are actually experiencing and versus the way it's perhaps articulated or promised. It's a great way to think about it.
Yeah, and one of the
go ahead, no, please.
I'm sorry. One of the things I was going to mention on the HR side, I think this changes our role. I've been told many times from people that, because I'm very outspoken about social justice. It's something that's close to my heart. And it's interesting because I've gotten a lot of traditional HR people tell me that's not your place. Mm-hmm. And I look at them and I'm thinking, well, the gap is narrowing for employers and for organizations and for HR people to understand that this is a part of the human experience. Yeah. It's something that you bring with you. And so I think the next gen around HR and employers is going to be, it is our place because we have social responsibility. Yeah. We have a place to talk about that and integrate that into our work.
That's amazing.
I was going to mention, and you nailed it home, is that, and also to Jason's point around cultural continuance, where does this responsibility live? Is it with the larger purpose of the organization, or does it live with daily interactions with leaders or individual contributors? And it's all of the above, right? I mean, this commitment and this HR relaxing a little bit and getting to understand an employee and what makes them tick. This idea that we can't ask certain questions, and of course there's protected class and things we can't do, but we need to become a little more open, and those who want to share more about themselves and really feel like they're a part of a family, organizations have to start getting them more comfortable with that. So it is HR's responsibility. Yes. It's every employee's responsibility. It's every manager's, every leader's, every senior leader, and that ultimately creates a culture that we're trying to create.
That's great.
It's a better world.
So I've got another to transition, another maybe final topic, Dan. This is sort of making this up. This wasn't on our outline. All right, so you guys ready? Are you ready?
Unpredictable. Right. We promised it.
this won't seem that unpredictable. Let's assume, Angela, that you do really great work. Well, actually, let me take a step back. Let's assume that you're an organization and you realize you've got a lot of work to do around culture and all the things we've talked about. And let's assume that you start to do your design thinking, human-centered design work, baseline work, and you sort of articulate, okay, here's where we are, and this is where we want to try and go to. So it's going to be a change management process moving forward. What's the right way to think about insights and analytics as you're doing your work? Because it starts to get pretty heady. These are some pretty, these concepts get pretty complex. What's the right way, especially if we're thinking beyond engagement, which even now many managers and leaders will say, this is too much information for me. I'm just trying to do my job. But what is the right way to break this down into an analytics so you can see how your organization is doing against plan?
Yeah, I don't know if I had a chance to answer the question about the annual survey, but I would say that needs to go away, right? Because annual is, is not.
And then there's cheering.
Right. Woo!
Yeah.
It's just not conducive to the human experience, right? So we are complex. We do not live on a yearly or a fiscal cycle. It's complex. So I always recommend with your journey map, right? So you've mapped out the moments that matter. That's where you insert analytics, right? The feedback loop loops throughout the entire year. And so, and you have to have some discretion, right? Because nobody expected COVID to happen. That was on nobody's journey map before 2020. So really anything that is going to impact decision-making, emotions, life events of a collective group, I think need to be from a discretionary perspective, added in there. Because again, emotions matter at work. I know we don't like to think about that, but they do. And so I think, though, to kind of summarize, having the feedback loop for all those moments that matter that you've mapped out throughout the process, and then having some discretion around check-ins and equipping your leadership team to have those one-to-one conversations outside of a tool, outside of a technology.
Yeah, that's great.
That's great. And I just reading Jason's last comment, that tax is that's the only annual thing left. Yeah, that's
sure.
That's very, very true. And even nowadays, it hasn't been annual due to COVID realities. So I think we're got a few minutes left, but I'm just going to go back to a few things you said, Angela, around summarizing. What can we do? This tangible takeaways. And I loved your first point. Number one, compare purpose amongst people who work in an organization. Do you all share it, understand it? Almost behind a screen where you're not heard. Ask everyone the same question, right? What does this organization represent? What do we believe in? Where are we going? Make sure everyone's pointing in the same direction. I think that that is to me that's something that organizations can start doing immediately and should be doing immediately. With that, a question for you, and this has come up a few times: should organizations revisit values? And I think you alluded to this, but is it the time to sort of take a look at, and not completely pivot, but should we revisit and adjust? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the old adage is values don't change, but culture does. I don't know if that's true anymore. I mean, we're changing so rapidly. I'll give you an example. When you take like a personality assessment or a default, I call them default assessments, like, your work style, all that stuff. They tell you those things usually don't change unless a big life event happens. Somebody dies, something changes drastically within your life. Same thing goes with values. COVID, it was massive. That was a big, if you think about the organization as a character, as a person, it impacted that person quite a bit, and it's changed the way we work. So I would challenge that values are going to change. and they probably need to change. So I think that that's something that needs to be taken into consideration when you're doing that audit. And maybe it's not they're changing drastically, but maybe some of the behaviors below them change, how you're operationalizing changes with the times.
Yeah, you know, that's feedback we give to our clients, that this idea that we're not allowed to evolve or we shouldn't evolve is kind of ludicrous. It's silly. We have to look in the mirror, right, and reflect. Here's where we are, and here's where we need to go, and this is the value system that needs to be in place, and we all need to embrace it. And I think going through that review, especially during such transformational times, I mean, in our lifetime, right? I mean, this has been a ride that none of us could have ever expected. So it's absolutely going to have an effect on culture and organizations and value systems and belief systems. And so, yeah, I completely agree with you. Well, I think we're kind of coming to a close here, but I'm going to repeat it again: culture is not an HR thing; it's a leadership thing. There it is. That's the summary of this call. But any final words, P Dog and Changela?
I think Patrick and I are gonna make a music video.
Yeah, I'll
There
reach
you
out
go.
to you after the fact. It's gonna be amazing. It's gonna be amazing. But no, wow, what a great conversation. Thank you for your just sharp insight, Angela. It's just, and at the top of this, you talked about your mission statement, and you have such clarity around that, and you see this as your life's work. And thank you. You're just you're like a gift to our community, to our world and community. So thank you for your passion and interest, because it just means a lot. And thank you for being on the front lines of this too. And like you said, social justice is something that's passionate about you, and you're bringing that into the conversation. It's just, that's what we need. We need that courage and that leadership. So thank you for that, and thanks for just great insights. And hopefully everyone learned at least a few things in terms of, and hopefully we delivered, Dan, on our idea of how here. Going from kind of these heady ideas and trying to really break it down into a plan, because there's a lot of hard work ahead for organizations to move along the change curve.
It's a journey, but we need to start having these frontline conversations like this. So yeah, Angela, thank you. I mean, it's an honor to meet you 5 years ago, and just so proud that we're able to have this conversation today. And I appreciate all the awesome comments, Jason. Thank you. I'm just reading through your comments here. It's a novel. I'm reading Jason's novel. This is awesome.
Some of those comments are gold. I feel like I got to copy and paste them, store them away somewhere.
Yeah, and I appreciate everyone's feedback. Allison, and everyone for joining this community. I know, again, this is week 2, and just again, proud to have everyone come on here for just conversation. And Angela, again, thank you for being taking time out of your day to join us. And be well, everybody. And as I say, stay radical.
Stay radical.
Stay radical, everyone.
So much. Great discussion. Awesome discussion.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, and thanks, everyone. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.